Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Leadership Now with me, Dan Pontefract. Today in the house, have I ever been waiting for this chat? Christian Stadler. Christian, welcome. First a bio, and then we'll get to a whole whack of different questions. Christian is a professor in strategic management at Warwick Business School, quite near my father, by the way. Prior to, he was at University of Bath School of Management, Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth, and Innsbruck University. Christian addresses fundamental strategic questions that enables companies to grow, adapt, and consistently beat their competitors. In his brilliant book, Open Strategy, Mastering Disruption from Outside the C-Suite, he explains how companies can craft strategy in a new, unconventional way, one tailor-made for today's faster, more volatile business environment. Do we even need that today? Yes, we do. His work has been featured thousands of times in outlets such as Harvard Business Review, Sloan Management Review, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, Bloomberg, Business Week, the BBC, amongst a host of others. His research examines how organizations can achieve sustainable competitive advantage. Christian is particularly interested in questions related to one, learning and innovation, and two, diversification of that. In 2021, Thinkers 50 bestowed and shortlisted Christian for the Strategy Award, and in 2013, placed him on the Thinkers 50 radar list. So it's 10 years of being on the radar. I've stared at you for a long time, now a decade, Christian. You possess a really wide-ranging repertoire of insights, interests, research, and opinion, which is why I've been dying to talk to you. So we're going to spend some time today on your specialties. But first, I want to play back something that you've written and then sort of ask your opinion today, Christian, on it sort of today. So you say the following: formulating and executing sound organizational strategy is difficult work. Strategy is often made by elite teams and thus can be limited by their biases about competitors, customer needs, and market forces. And it can be an uphill battle, though, convincing stakeholders across the company to channel money, time, and energy in a new and unproven direction. Your solution to both the strategy formulation and execution challenges is unique, if not radical. And you say, Christian, open up your strategy process. And I love the word open for so many reasons. So, Christian, why should we be opening up the strategy process to the organization writ large?
First of all, thanks for the intro. You made me blush a little bit. Thank you. Another thank you. You picked up a quote which I can still, positively respond to. We all written stuff in the past which we, find a little embarrassing these days. But that's, with this one, I can really live with still. Maybe some stats on this first. When you ask around why strategy fails, it is actually most often in the execution side. Tons of surveys in this space, and somewhere between 50 and 90% of the respondents say that the reason for a failure in the strategy domain was because something went wrong in the execution. Now, why is that? I think sometimes it's an understanding question where things that sound really smart and great when you talk about this in the boardroom, maybe when you bring in a consulting firm, once people in the front line hear about this, it's just difficult for sort of, translating this into their operational reality. So that can be one reason. The other one could be is that they don't like what they hear, that they simply think this is not something I want to do here. And people will find ways to undermine strategies if they don't like them. So how can I sort of, make sure that none of those two reasons become a big issue? I think involvement, that's really the answer. Bring people into the discussion, then they have an ability to translate some of those things already in the process, understand them, and they automatically develop psychological ownership if they have a word in the say in this. Numbers to back this up again, we conducted a survey. We asked people who have done open strategy in which way it might benefit them, and 70% of them told us that opening up helped them with getting more commitment around strategic goals.
So Christian, one of the things that seems, how might I say that with a tongue of cynicism, is that many organizations are rife with hierarchy, clueless leaders, sycophants, psychopathy, And what you have is essentially still Taylorism at play within the management ranks, yet, and by the way, I'm with you, obviously, so I'm pulling you a little bit, but why is it that open strategy offers this sort of more diverse source of external knowledge, yet it seems so many senior leaders in particular refuse to kind of, open it up and get that buy-in and or just the ideation from people who are at the front lines or even mid-management?
So first of all, if the leadership doesn't want it, don't waste your energy. Yeah, it will not work. Yeah. That's the reality that they have to buy into this process. We've seen, for example, a small engineering type firm in Germany where the CEO was sort of in two minds, but said, okay, we'll give it a shot. Yeah, but then the management team was split. Some of them really felt that they should be the ones calling the shots, and when the results of that process of more of one of those open strategy techniques were not aligned with what they liked, then they really discarded it. And all it does in a situation like this is all those who were involved get more discouraged and more annoyed about the whole thing. So don't do it if the leadership doesn't want it. Now, I would say that actually most leaders are open to this, and I've been speaking and engaging with people across the globe where in some settings it's harder to do this, because you generally have sort of more hierarchical approach to organizations. But I think what resonates everywhere is the need to involve different important stakeholders. And, you can frame it as such. That takes off the edge if you're in a place where open kind of, doesn't resonate as much as it does with you and me. If you talk about bring those people who really can make or break your stuff to the fold, then people will say, sure, that's smart.
So how does open strategy, we continue this thread a little bit, differentiate itself, I suppose, or what mechanisms or mechanics does a leader need to employ when you're, a smallish company of whatever, 50 to 100, the mid-size, if it's maybe 100 to 2,000, and then that there's kind of two large levels, right? 2,000 to 5,000, 5,000 and much bigger, which becomes kind of almost multinational in nature. Is there a different playbook that needs to be prescribed by the leader when your size of company is different?
Not entirely. Of course, there is some techniques that are suited for different parts of the process. Yeah, and particularly when I look at the tail end of the strategy process, the one that is more working on execution and implementation, then you want to get as many people involved as possible. So if you have a very large organization, to do that, usually you have to go digitally. Yeah, so there's some mechanisms where you use some sort of discussion forum, or you use a jam technology that's from IBM, something that is sort of very smart in that space. You can involve many, many thousands this way. And you probably don't have to do that if you are in a much smaller company where you can do things hands-on. But then there's, parts somewhere in the ideation space, in the formulation space, where even large organizations, they should, in my view, involve more people than usual, but it doesn't mean that everyone necessarily needs to be involved in that. And that means that some of the workshop techniques that you can use in a large company, you can also use in a small company and vice versa.
I love also how you just brought up IBM Jam. I mean, the idea, right, of having literally, right, an asynchronous or synchronous jam to unpack, discuss, ideate, sort of unearth, so to say. So what you touched on really is kind of like a process. And so, an academic colleague of yours at INSEAD, Ludo van Heijden, right, came up with FAIR process, right? You engage, you explore, you explain, execute, evaluate. That's a process of collaboration, which itself could be an open strategy mechanism. So, Christian, what are some other tools or techniques or processes that you've seen work that allow that conduit, right, of ideation and input that makes the employee, the team member feel, oh, I'm part of something here. I can help the strategy.
So one of my favorites is a nightmare competitor exercise. The name itself, sort of, resonates really well. The core idea is the following. Companies will face some sort of disruption at some point in their history, probably, or many of them do. Now, how do you possibly prepare for those things? You can frame it as an opportunity, or you can frame it as a threat. And Clayton Christensen, the Harvard professor who introduced this whole idea around disruption, the innovator's dilemma, he always said that framing it as a threat is probably much more effective. The reason is that there's so many things companies have to do, and unless they feel it's something that is existential to them and a real threat, they'll probably have other things that they prioritize. So framing it as a threat, is a good idea. Now, what the nightmare competitor exercise does, it brings together people from both outside the company and inside company. I would say, half-half is a good mixture, because you need crucial voices from outside as well. And if there's too few, then their input is easily drowned out. You form teams, mixed teams of internals and externals, and they develop a fictional company that potentially would disrupt your organization if it exists. Yeah, so it gives you this freedom to think broadly, and then you have competitions between those teams where they develop these business models. I think you call it Shark Tank in North America. We call it Dragon's Den. That sort of style, how you set up the workshop. It's a real fun thing. There's a German consulting company who was involved in writing the book as well, and they have done north of 200 of those type of workshops. And just, it's inspiring. I've run some of those as well. I've done them both in the classroom. I've done them with executive clients. It's a cool exercise.
I love it. And I have seen that employed rather well here in North America. And just for a point of clarification for listeners or viewers, and Christian, being English, we speak the King's and Queen's English. So in Canada, it's Dragon's Den. We don't do Shark's Tank. That's for our Americans down south. Yeah. Anyway, that's okay.
My apologies. Yeah.
That's okay. No, honestly, I'm just making sure people understand. Well, what's a Shark Tank? And anyway, we're all good here. Okay. Now we're going to dovetail into a bunch of different threads here, because you're just so wide ranging, as they say, in insights, research, and opinion. I'm curious, Christian, your current take today. Sort of here we are in 2023. We're 3 years post pandemic, or kind of still in a pandemic. Really, the World Health Organization hasn't called this whole thing off yet. So I'm curious what you're noticing, the signals, the bat signals, if you will, from your research and your working and dealings with companies and students and leaders. What's the current state of organizational culture today? Like, I know it's a wide-ranging view and you have different companies that are doing different things, but have you seen something different, generally speaking, pre-pandemic to where we are today in kind of mid-ish 2023?
I would say yes. Yeah, some of them happened after, some because of the pandemic. So there's this whole challenge about labor shortage. I think that has been there a little bit before that, but it seems more pronounced because during the pandemic, there's some people in the workforce who decided that, well, maybe I don't want to work a normal job as I did before. That kind of accelerates that. Now it gets mingled with very difficult political questions around migration that most companies notice is necessary, but it's not usually a vote winner in most Western countries to be very pro migration. So that's sort of a big topic which companies labor about. Yeah, no pun intended here. That's something I think that I notice. It coincides also with this whole, so do people need to come back into the office or will they continue working from home? Right. People discovered that maybe it's quite convenient to work from home, but the mid layer of management, the upper layer of management find it much more difficult to handle this. I have a quick question. Before that, I just popped down my nose and, somebody was able to answer. Now I kind of need to try and reach them online. So that's not as comfy for leaders, and companies try to sort of figure out how they can organize that. And then the third big thing I've certainly picked up is the whole technology stuff is very sort of real. A few weeks ago, whenever you open a newspaper, there was something written about ChatGPT there. So, big topic. That's one technology dimension, but there's many, and it's a continuation from what we have seen before. Car industry, for example, electrification, mobility solutions, all this stuff keeps executives awake at night. Maybe one last one, I forgot that I also notice more and more executives worry about is the whole geopolitical side of things. Both internally, there was this, long post-war period where companies stayed out of politics, but with hot issues around climate change, around social justice, there's an expectation from clients that businesses have a voice on this. And it's tricky because whichever way, you air your opinion, it tends to not resonate with another group in your country. And then there's the big international dimension with, China and Russia starting to drift further apart from the Western world than we have seen before. And, the war of Ukraine is just one phenomenon that falls in there. And that creates very, very tricky situation for many companies.
Yeah, indeed it does. I mean, the geopolitical nuance from sort of dancing in between what China needs, wants, and what it's trying to do longer term versus what, the West, if you will, are trying to accommodate. It's quite a dance for sure. So I can see how that does have significant effect on strategy ultimately. Now,
sorry, to add, it of course depends a lot where you are as well. I spent a bit of time in the Middle East. I lived 2 years in Nairobi, came back in September, and the perspectives are different there. We might think we are coming from the West. Oh, we've been so helpful there. The perspective for many people in Kenya is whether you steal from us or the Chinese steal from us, what's the difference? We see where we get the better deal.
Right. They're the new Switzerland. Great. Now, one of the things I picked up on, which you have already proven in your research, and by the way, I'm one of those people that do read academic papers. I know you've asked managers and leaders to do so. So I'm that crazy guy that has already been listening to you, Christian. So you've actually studied intra-firm geographic mobility, and you've proven that organizational performance actually can be enhanced by the conduit of the transfer of knowledge when one said employee is plucked up, put into another unit or even another geography and another unit, because it creates, I'm assuming, stronger weak ties or stronger ties themselves, the knowledge transfer itself, the blossoming, if you will, right, of that currency of intellect and collective intelligence. So my question for you, I suppose, knowing that your research proves that there is benefits to intra-firm geographic mobility, what is it that today's organizations should be thinking about from the appetite and the thirst and the perspective of young people who are Gen Z and or millennials that are actually kind of yearning for those experiences? And so should we be doing, Christian, things like, more job tours of duty and kind of internal Fiverr and Upwork and kind of gig economy and just transfers of people into other units so that we can increase XYZ? Do we do that, Christian? And what do we increase of XYZ if we do that?
I mean, I love the idea. My older son is sort of at the very tail end of the Gen Zs, yeah. So he's a 2012 born, obviously far away still from work, and he's been traveling widely, loves it, yeah. The experiences you pick up when you live somewhere else, how to replicate, yeah. So companies need to make this possible. Absolutely, yeah. They will benefit from it. It helps them to tap also into maybe new geographies. Yeah, when we talked earlier about labor shortage being an issue, by some of your people having spent time in a geography they maybe would usually not go to, they make some connections and figure out, well, maybe, how we can start an office over there and work with people, kind of make a cultural fit that I didn't think of or couldn't think if I haven't lived there. So definitely, get people travel.
By the way, my eldest as well, born 2003, and has been doing those tours during her degree. So I can completely relate as a father of a Gen Z and them wanting these experiences, which is partially why I asked. So thanks for being personal as well about your own son. Now, I'm going to almost rapid fire a couple other questions here. So hope, you've written previously that hope is a powerful emotion. Smart business leaders, they know this and they use it to rally the troops. And sort of you have this kind of three-prong approach about hope, about hiring people with higher levels of hope than you possibly. Second, needing to kind of create an environment that's conducive to hope. And then thirdly, the communication being inspiring and hopeful. So I need some hope, Christian. I do. And I'm sort of leaning on you right now to help me understand why hope is important and what can we do, inclusive of your three strategies, right, to sort of inculcate this sense of hope that not all is lost and we're actually on a more hopeful trajectory than we were sort of 3 or 5 years ago.
Well, you are in North America. You guys are much more hopeful than us Europeans anyway. We tend to be much more miserable and think everything is going downhill. I don't know, young people that I meet, and I do, particularly, my students, they're still very optimistic. They see opportunities out there. And, I've been teaching in Dartmouth. I've been teaching over here. I've been teaching in Africa. And that's a trajectory I see everywhere. Maybe more so even than the millennials. Yeah. So the kind of, Gen Zs, I think, start to be a bit more positive. Again, I read something about this yesterday. And the argument there was that it's partly to do with if people have more information, then they're more confident, and that kind of gives them also that certainty that they can make things work. They have less of an imposter syndrome. Now the Gen Zs, they've not been around when there was no Google. In other words, they have much easier access to information than you and me had as we grew up. I think there's a lot of hope out there, and I wouldn't be downcast.
Excellent. Well, I mean, a new infusion of hope. Thank you for that. But almost paradoxically, you also kind of almost bring up Steve Jobs in a recent piece that you did, and also a neat little video from some mountaintop that you're on. And Steve Jobs famously said, it's really hard to design products by focus groups. A lot of times people don't know what they want until you show it to them. And you say, don't listen to your customers. And you sort of go on to describe some reasons. So I'm asking you, Christian, why should we not be listening to customers? And tell us a bit about how that relates to hope, strategy, culture, and so forth.
Okay. Not because customers would be more or less stupid than us, but because they're precisely as stupid as the two of us. My point here is, it's really hard to articulate what you really want and what you like. Often you don't know. There was a famous experiment done in Southern California where people were asked why they're saving energy. And, they came up with reasons like, we want to do good for the environment. The next thing that team of researchers did, they sent out little probes and different probes to different households with explaining in some reasons, okay, it's good for you to reduce your energy need because that's good for the environment. And some people got this little prompt that your neighbors started to save energy as well. And guess what? The main driver of why people were actually saving energy when they started to measure it after the little prompts was the neighbors did it as well. Yeah. So we don't want to look bad in front of our neighbors. But I don't think that people viciously lied first when they responded to the survey. They just sort of didn't think like this. Now, what's the implication? If I'm a company, so I can do Steve Jobs, where I say, okay, I will just give it a shot. I'll throw something out and I see whether people actually like that. A lot of startups do something similar, an experimental type of approach. You can do it also in controlled type of experiments. Airbnb, for example, has product development teams that do controlled experiments where they have two groups and they change a feature in their product offering or one of the buttons or so they have online for one group and not the other. And for exactly the same time period, you observe what's different, and that way they can see what actually works. So they don't ask the customers, but they actually see what their customers are doing and not doing. That's probably a much smarter way to do. And now, to draw the line back all to our early part of the conversation with open strategy, you might think also of involving some of your customers in the strategy making process, because that's a much deeper conversation than just sending out a survey. And I think in that conversation, customers will be in a position to sort of, give you the kind of inputs that are truly helpful for you.
It always requires as well, Christian, is this fair to say, some patience, because when you do A/B testing and you're looking to sort of almost validate through that creativity results and kind of almost coming up with other incubating new ideas, is patience one of the virtues that's required for this to actually happen materially positive?
Oh, of course, yeah, because things never quite work out maybe as you plan. There's a million things that you tried, only one will work. Yeah, patience is a big one. Yeah, I don't have it personally, but it's a good one to have.
Neither do I. Squirrel. I mean, I'll be distracted till the end of time here because I'm so excited about new things. Okay, two last questions. So the penultimate one here, I'm going to date both of us, but 10 years ago, you wrote a really seminal piece in MIT Sloan Management, called "Why Good Leaders Don't Need Charisma." And in it, you're sort of providing evidence that charismatic business leaders typically possibly can outperform or not outperform their ordinary counterparts over the long run. So tell me a bit about today, 10 years later. Is charisma winning or is it not?
You get outliers, yeah, and I think that's true then as much as it is today. You might be lucky and you hired Steve Jobs, where this guy is going to bring the organization to a place you never go without him, or you would have never find that space. But likewise, it's possible you hire somebody who brings you in a direction where you absolutely don't want to go. The charisma, in a way, pulls people along, and they might not, the usual kind of defense mechanisms that they have up there are not quite as strong then. And in the long run, the risk, I think, of getting it right with the charismatic leader is higher than the benefit of having somebody who's a solid team player who doesn't think that he or she will just do it alone. I mean, how big is the chance that you happen to hire the next Steve Jobs? Just put all your money in the lottery and probably your chances are higher.
And being struck by lightning in the same day, I think is possible.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I want to end with, I think, a mutual admiring individual in our lives. And I was fortunate enough to meet him twice at a Drucker Forum in Vienna, and that's Charles Handy. Oh. And we've both living off of the shoulder, the giants of his shoulders to a degree. And you brought up something pretty profound in sort of your recently poignant observation of Charles, and the notion of going for a walk. And it kind of ties back to my earlier question about patience. And so I guess just on a reflection basis here for you, Christian, sort of what has Charles Handy meant to you, but also just the notion of the walk that you point out, and sort of, the example you're using is sort of being in North America, and I think specifically in Boston, and sort of opening up to his guests, let's just go for a walk, let's go to the Boston Commons and let's walk around a few times. I thought it was so, I know you're paraphrasing Charles, but it was such a Charles Handy example. It's like you couldn't get more personified of Charles Handy, this walking legend of patience and observation. Yet more often than not, the guy is right when it looks at the management techniques, right, of what we should be doing. So I'm just curious, your thoughts live, right, about Charles and sort of the idea of Charles and the walk and patience.
So this is a story that he told via video at this year's, was it this year? Last year, really? Last year's Drucker Forum. And I think he's too frail, is getting old, so he couldn't travel actually to the forum, and therefore he sent the video. So the story is that he is with some friends in Boston, and he suggests after lunch, let's go for a walk. And Americans like goals, yeah. So they asked, so where do we go? And Charles says, no, we go for a walk. And they said, yeah, but we need to know where we go. Maybe we can even drive there, yeah. So we don't have to go. And Charles sort of realizes, these people need a bit more direction. So he tells them, okay, we walk first clockwise, and then we walk counterclockwise around the Boston Commons, the park in Boston. So they do that. They go on the walk. Then when they come back, the man of the house, the husband, takes Charles aside and says, at first it was quite odd for me to go on this walk. But as I did, I started to think about my life. And I realized that I actually don't like what I'm doing. So I want to go back to college and become a teacher. But don't tell my wife, she doesn't know yet. Beautiful story, I think, yeah, where essentially what Charles is telling us, we need some unstructured activities, and walks seem to be particularly good in this, where we just sort of, stroll around, let the mind flow, and occasionally some really good ideas come from this. Others, might do that under the shower. That's fine as well. But the core point is you just don't always follow a particular goal. You don't always want to achieve something. And in this unstructured way, better and more solid things come about. I like that. And as you said, I think that's very characteristic of him.
What a beautiful way to end this. Thank you for that so much, Christian. This has been just a highlight, a thrill, and continue to learn a lot from you. Where can we find out more about the great Christian Stadler?
Maybe one of the easiest ways to either follow my LinkedIn newsletter or Forbes. I write there. Usually, I try once a month a piece there. So check that out. My latest one came out this morning, and I've written about whether managers should doubt. So that's maybe a piece to pick up.
Well, I don't doubt you, Christian, and big thanks for you to be on the show today. Again, I look forward to the next one, and hopefully we clink glasses either at the Drucker Forum and or Thinkers 50 Forum later on in 2023. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Okay, everyone, another episode of Leadership Now with me, Dan Pontefract, today in the house, Christian Stadler. Boy, was that fun. Thanks, and tune in next time to another guest here on the show. Thanks again, Christian.